Good afternoon. Are we good? Good. Good afternoon. Welcome. We're not there yet. I was just stopped. So I will wait for my cue. And thank you for sitting in silence. Okay, good. I believe we had to start the footage, so thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Good afternoon. My name is Katja Geršak. I am the executive director of a non-governmental organization, Regional Dialogue, and also an editor-in-chief of the Bled Strategic Times, and I will be our moderator at this extremely important discussion today. I think the title is extremely fitting, giving the theme of this year's Bled Strategic Forum, and it's called Ukraine, the Power of Solidarity. And indeed, that's what I believe it is, and we will start out with this premise. It is both an honor and a somber responsibility to welcome you to this very critical panel, where we're going to discuss the ongoing Russian aggression in Ukraine. And I think a lot of the time, when we think back, we have a couple of dates that define our lives. And I think everybody in this room will always remember when they were on 9/11. That's something that really powerfully defined the world that we live in today. And when we look at the aggression that's going on in Ukraine, I think it's with equal incredulity, even today, that such a thing can occur in Europe at this time. So I think everybody will always have a defining moment on the 24th of February 22, when this thing began. The conflict in Ukraine is not only about these two countries, Ukraine and Russia. It is not a regional issue. It is a matter of global concern that has far-reaching implications for international security, diplomacy, as well as human rights. It's this act of aggression that has devastated Ukraine and its people. And the Russian invasion of Ukraine has long-term security and geopolitical implications, not only for Europe, but I believe on a global scale. Because it's not only Ukraine that's under attack, but it's also a repudiation of peace and order in Europe, as well as the international order, which puts rule of law and self-determination at its core. I believe we're entering an era, one in which there's more instability in the global order, and one in which rule of law and democracy, and I think this is a crucial point, in which rule of law and democracy are not universally recognized as values that humanity aspires to. These are some of the fundamental shifts that are now globally taking place, and I believe something that will make us less secure in the future. So I'm sorry for the dire opening of the way we view the setting of this panel, but I'm very happy that I have this incredibly distinguished panelists that are going to together delve into the complexities of this conflict, its implications for neighboring countries and a broader international system. So without further ado, I will go from left to right and just in order introduce the incredible panelists that we have here today. His Excellency Krzysztof Olendzki, the Polish ambassador to Slovenia. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for being on the panel today, because we were welcoming your State Secretary as well, but due to weather conditions that apparently are all plaguing us everywhere in Europe, he could not join us, but thank you for jumping in. Mr. Krsto Perović, State Secretary at the Ministry of Defense of Montenegro. Thank you for being with us. Of course, our host, Dr. Damir Črnčec, State Secretary at the Ministry of Defense of Slovenia. Thank you for initiating and hosting the panel today. His Excellency Andrii Taran, Ambassador of Ukraine to the Republic of Slovenia and former Minister of Defense of Ukraine. I could not imagine a more suitable person to be here with us today to discuss these issues. Mr. Holger Haibach, Country Director for the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation for Slovenia and Croatia, and also a former member of Bundestag, which I will come back to later. But for this first round, and I would really like for this to be a conversation, and hopefully, if time allows in the end, we can open for a couple of questions. Ambassador Taran, we are discussing your country, and I think it's only fitting that you start addressing these questions. And President Zelensky repeatedly stated and continues to state that just peace there will be no compromises as to the sovereignty and freedom and territorial integrity of Ukraine. But this is now the position, but how do we get there? Please help us understand, how do you believe that we should get there in the day of 552 of the war, where Ukraine's counteroffensive is continuing its slow progress? where do you think we've achieved and what is still lacking?
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for coming here to express your interest. This is my second, actually, time participation in Bled Strategic Forum. And I just told to the State Secretary Črnčec my observation about the difference between this year forum and last year forum. Last year, there were several times mentioned Ukraine, war between Russia and Ukraine, but it was concentrated on some other issues. This year I was really surprised and pleased with the recognition of the importance of what's going on in Ukraine. What's going on, this is not a conflict, this is real war. I hate the use of term conflict regarding what's going on in our country. This is a real war started by Russia, who against not just Ukraine, who is against internationally recognized borders, who is against Ukrainian people. They deny our right to exist. They proclaimed that this is our territory. They mean Russian territory. They proclaimed that there is no such a nation like Ukrainians. They consider us part of a Russian nation. So it is really war of two civilizations. What's going on now in Ukraine, where we are now? Nowadays it is very obvious that war will not end soon. Nowadays it is obvious that Russia has, I would say, demographic prevalence. They have a lot of people which they don't count. They have a lot of people to be mobilized. They do not count their losses. But Ukraine recognizes the value of human lives. We are struggling. We are in the process of counter-offensive operation, but we have to count the lives of our soldiers. We have to value the lives of our citizens. That is why we are not as successful as people expected. Because Russia is really a strong country, and whoever might say that Russian army is weak, they are not weak. They have huge armed forces. They have huge arsenals of tanks, vehicles, artillery shells, and the most important, as I said, they have huge numbers of lives that the Kremlin leadership does want to count. That is why we are in the process of achieving some successes in this counteroffensive. Of course, if we had more modern weapons, if we had more artillery, if we had more modern missiles which can hit enemy at a long distance, if we had modern aviation, we would be more successful. But we have what we have. We will continue to fight, and we will understand. And we understand already, and I believe this is obvious for every civilized nation, that this is war for surviving Ukraine as a state, for surviving Ukrainians as a nation. And we appreciate the approach of so many friends and partners. I like that the word solidarity is the main topic for today. The word solidarity means a lot of value for Ukraine, for Ukrainians. We express gratitude to all our friends, to all our allies, and we believe in our victory. Thank you.
Thank you. Yesterday at the opening of the Bled Strategic Forum, our Prime Minister Golob stated and pointed out, and I quote, "Ukraine, a country that is going through so many painful moments and suffering, is helping us. Ukraine sent their best engineers and they're still in Slovenia and they're helping people to rebuild our communities." And Dr. Črnčec, what is your assessment of the support that Ukraine is receiving after 1.5 years since the Russian aggression began?
Thank you very much, Katja. Good afternoon to everybody. I would just like to continue. You said something about solidarity. It's the title of the panel, and of course also Ambassador mentioned this word. I like or tend to use also word military solidarity, which is one branch of word of solidarity, and Slovenia is a country that understands and understood its history. In '91, we were in very similar position when we were attacked by the state, by the army, Yugoslav army at that time, and we fought for our independence. And at that time, Slovenia was under the embargo. And luckily for Ukraine, this didn't happen with Ukraine, because probably the consequences and the panel today would be different if that would be the case 1.5 years ago. So Slovenia stood, and it's still standing by Ukraine. And I was also very, not positively, but overwhelmed with the feelings when I saw that country with, that is within the war, it's waging a war, sent after the biggest floods that we have in this country, the best team of engineers with the equipment to Slovenia to help our people on the ground. And you know very well also the representative of countries standing here gave us a lot of support, and we are just about to open the military bridge built by Polish engineers. And so Slovenia got also a solidarity, not the military, but also humanitarian one, from NATO member states, from European Union as an institution, and the states. Same goes for NATO, and of course bilaterally through our friends in Western Balkans. And this is a really two-way street, and we are experiencing this. And what we saw and what we are seeing in today's with Ukraine, I would just like to finish this first introduction of mine with the starting points of your introduction about the peace. I like to say that it's very easy, because everybody is talking about peace and how to achieve peace and who is going to prevail. It's very simple. One country is aggressor, and their military forces are across the border. They just withdrew their forces, and peace will be here. It's very simple. Then we can go into the discussions how they are going to pay the damage how they are going to compensate for the loss of lives and everything else, dealing with the consequences. But it's very simple. To all people who write the letters and public appeals who are evoking dialogue and all these things, yeah, everything's okay. The diplomacy has to work. But the deeds on the grounds are very simple, and everything is achievable very easily. Just go out, and that's it. And this was also Slovenian experience in '91.
Thank you very much. And moving on to the Montenegrin perspective, as we have this theme of solidarity running through the panel as well, you'll probably remember when Montenegro was entering NATO, Slovenia was also the contact embassy in the process, and I think we solidified that bond through the forward presence NATO mission in Latvia together. What do you believe we should be doing? How do you assess the support Ukraine is receiving from the alliance?
Thank you, Katja. Thank you for invitation to participate in this excellent panel and forum. Is really impressive. Well, as you said, with Slovenia, we have really, I would say, not just partner relations, it's really more like real friends. Slovenia was the most helpful during our path towards NATO, and that just continued later on. And on the issue of Ukraine, I think it was exactly the same thing. We had the same way of thinking, and were among the small but still determined countries to help Ukraine. As Damir already referred, the situation in Ukraine is very simple. One side is aggressor, the other side is fighting for literally for a survival of the state and the nation. The very positive thing is that the first wave of responses from both NATO and the European Union was really a strong solidarity and the readiness to help Ukraine defend its statehood. Sometimes there are complaints that some things are too slow, too much negotiations and so on. But basically, we have to understand that in case of all of our countries, we are democracies, and you have differences among different nations, different governments, and so on. So it always takes a time. It's not the case with Russia, where you have one person or a small clique that is basically decision maker. But after more than a year and a half, I think that determination on our part, it was obvious in Vilnius during the NATO summit. It's really ironclad, so there is no wavering in support to Ukraine. And at the same time, what the Ukrainian ambassador said, I think is very important to understand that for Ukraine, maybe sometimes we expect something to happen faster, and in terms, for example, of the counteroffensive and so on. But Ukrainians have different approach from Putin. They want to preserve their population, their soldiers, and so on. And I think that they know probably the best, how to defend their own country. The important thing is also that I think that in the countries that used to be neutral, there is pretty slow, but still a change of mind, and that more and more nations are willing to more openly side with Ukraine. And the reason for that, one of the main reasons, is that Russia was basically humiliated there, that Ukrainians demonstrated to the whole world that even if you are much smaller and not militarily and that strong as the aggressor, your willingness, your determination, and a number of allies you have can help you, to defend your territory. So, in terms of how the war is going to end, I'm absolutely positive that Ukraine is going to prevail, and Russia is going to suffer not just a short-term but a long-term defeat, strategic defeat, which is going to produce a number of internal issues in Russia, which was happening throughout the history of Russia.
Thank you. I think you make a very, very solid and valuable point about the fact that regardless of the size of the resources of the country, the fact that you have allies and the number of allies matter, and the fact that we're pulling together. Ambassador Olendzki, I wanted to point out that I think it's extremely important to have the Eastern flank perception and from your end, and Poland being has taken one of the leading role in Europe when it comes to the European response to Russia's invasion. You've become a very crucial country in terms of supplying support and providing that corridor to Ukraine. I was wondering, what kind of assistance do you think we need to provide for victory in Ukraine? And also your perception of security from the eastern flank of the alliance, of how have you seen the security situation altered because of this?
Thank you very much for inviting me, for having me here. I'm really very, very happy that after almost 3.5 years of being ambassador here to Slovenia, I have this honor to stay here before the audience of the Black Strategic Forum. Just let me also express my condolences to all Slovenians for the losses after the flood, which we've saw 3 weeks ago and which we are justifying right now. What's needed? I mean, solidarity for Poles, it's one of the most important elements. I mean, in fact, in the 80s, in 1980, we've presented solidarity as a way of living, as a way of building up ties in our society, and building up ties in Europe. So it was a Polish Solidarność, which in fact changed Europe, just transformed it from the Cold War zone into the free Europe, which started to transform itself toward the EU. Unfortunately, Russia remained out. Why? Because they never wanted to be a part of the free world. Russia is a Russia. Russia is a mindset. It's not, the country which would like to live peacefully with others. No, they would like to be an empire. They would like to invade. They would like to capture. And if someone is thinking in a different way than they, so they are going to punish it. And Ukrainians, they had this courage to pronounce themselves to be Europeans, to live according to the rule of law, democracy and freedom. They dared to express their own national identity, and there was the cause of the war. Then what is needed? Poland is the place through which almost all the assistance is going to Ukraine. Rzeszów is one of the most important cities in Europe right now. It's the biggest airport through which this assistance is coming. Przemysl, it's another city which is totally mobilized, not by the authorities, but by citizens, just to help Ukrainians, just to help to deliver equipment, just to help to deliver practically everything. In those days, Polish state is spending €1 billion for medical assistance to the Ukrainian refugees. It's only for healthcare, not counting, for example, education, because we are having almost 1 million of Ukrainian kids in our schools. But talking about military assistance, what's very important, the equipment, and then first of all, equipment which helps to survive the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. It was not so long ago when our commander-in-chief just decided to donate to his counterpart from Ukraine 50 Rosomak, 8 wheels vehicle, armored vehicle for the 50th anniversary of his counterpart in Ukraine, just for protecting the life of Ukrainian soldiers. Then the others are coming. They need not only the Rosomaks, but also other equipment which we are ready to deliver. In the same time, trying to not to disarm ourselves. So that's why we decide to spend 4% of our GDP for the armament of Poland. Also because we are delivering armament to Ukraine. We need Ukraine to be strong and to win because it depends on them, the freedom of Europe, the freedom of the Western world. Maybe you are not able to realize that fact. I am old enough to remember that in the 80s when I was studying, I was having my military course, and for our militaries at that time from the Communist Army, they were trying to convince us that we are fighting for peace. We are fighting for peace. To invite Denmark, to invite Germany, to invite Netherlands, we are fighting for peace. And the Russians are fighting for peace. And there are a lot of people also here in this country who are saying that we must fight for peace. We must enforce the peace. The peace is most important. Here is the one American expression about the peace, but I don't want to quote it. But it is totally wrong. We are fighting for freedom, and they are fighting just to enslave us, all of us. And the solidarity which we are called to deliver to Ukraine, to stand aside with Ukraine, to help in any sense. But first of all, to deliver weapons. Those Leopards, those missiles that you are having in the storages, if you will be keeping them in your storages and waiting for Russians, they will come for sure. But you will not have a time and opportunity to use them. Because if they will crush Ukraine, they will be very soon in the NATO zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I believe the issue of defense spending, which you brought up, is extremely important for the alliance as well as for defense of Europe as such. Mr. Haibach, I am going to put you a little bit in the shoes of former member of the German Bundestag at the outset, and because I cannot avoid the issue of the drastic reversal of German policy in this regard. Germany had a long-held policy of refusing to export weapons to conflict zones. And the fact that German decision to send Leopard 2 tanks and also other equipment is nothing less of a historic break with the post-World War II foreign policy for Germany. So I was wondering, what is your assessment of, what was the momentum that led to such a policy shift in Germany? And what does that mean for us?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and also thank you, State Secretary, for allowing me to be on this panel. Well, while I was preparing for the panel, I was thinking of my time in Parliament, and in 2008, when Russia invaded parts of Georgia, I was representing Germany in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Why I'm saying this is because I was chairman of the Rules Committee, and as such I was obliged to do the report on the stripping of the voting rights of the Russian delegation, which we then did for a certain amount of time. But it was very difficult to really get a reaction in German public to all of this. In 2014, when Russia invaded the Crimea Peninsula, it was still this more general feeling like not our war, somewhere else, far away. And what really changed things dramatically was the 24th of February last year. The government came out of the stumbling block a little bit slow, but they picked up the speed. And the reason why they were able to pick up the speed was because there was all of a sudden an awareness of this could be our war. This might be our war, and it might endanger us as a people. And that can actually point to one moment where in one German newspaper, when the first Russian missiles hit areas on the border between Ukraine and Poland, somebody took a map, put it into the newspaper and said, look, this is where the missiles came. This is 505 kilometers, and this is the distance between where the missiles came down and Berlin. So all of a sudden, there was this understanding that helping Ukraine, being active in NATO, would be the only solution of also protecting Germany itself. And that is a feeling that hasn't been really existing in the country for a very long time, because In the early 2000s, we abolished, not we abolished, but we put the pause button to the draft system. We radically reduced spending for military, and we thought that wars might only be fought in Afghanistan or in Iraq or in Somalia or anywhere else. We needed an army of experts, and the whole general question of defending your homeland wasn't really on the map anymore. And that Russian war was the game changer. And it enabled the government and also politics in general to take bold decisions as far as increasing defense spending is concerned. I hope it's going to be continued in the future. I'm not exactly sure about it. But it also enabled us to take those decisions that were necessary to support Ukraine with the adequate equipment. And where we couldn't, it was a lot of times because we simply couldn't get the agreement of those who were also co-producing the weapon systems. For instance, when we talked about the ammunition, we had the problem that Switzerland didn't allow us to give that to the Ukraine because Oerlikon is a Swiss company which produces in Germany, and they said, no, we are strictly neutral. And now they have slightly shifted their position, but it was very difficult at times. I think there is even more necessary, but my perception of the situation as it is in Germany is that a lot more people understand right now this is not only the fight of the Ukrainians against Russia, it is the fight of the Western world against an aggressor. And that is really what changed the whole mindset of a lot of people in Germany.
I think we're getting a very strong message from a number of our panelists that freedom in Europe and Western world depends on the outcome of the Ukrainian conflict. I think you, Ambassador Olendzki, you articulated it, but I think the message here reverberates. And in light of that, as was stated at the beginning, I think the challenge to the rules-based global order by Russia is a context in which we have to put this conflict into. So Ambassador Taran, I turn to you and with a question of a new security architecture is probably emerging out of this crisis. What place will Ukraine have in it? And here we're also alluding to all the ongoing discussions around Ukrainian joining NATO in the future, around discussions that most NATO countries view Ukraine as a prospective member. But however, the prospect for Ukrainians' immediate joining is elusive. It's not there yet.
Okay, thank you. Very good question. It is obvious that this war started in Ukraine by Russia, changed a lot of politicians in sense of changing their mind. Such a war, such the war, destroyed the whole security architecture, not just in Europe, but in the whole world. The future architecture, security architecture, still is unclear. But the needs of changing the architecture of security is very, very obvious. We need to change the security architecture not just within Europe, but within many world institutions, including the UN. It is obvious that the state aggressor cannot dictate the policy in the UN Security Council. In this regard, I would like to greet the Slovenian election as a non-permanent member of the Security Council. I believe that Slovenia will do its best in the UN as a whole and in the UN Security Council. And I believe that nowadays we need changes there. I spent 3 years working as a permanent mission of Ukraine to the United Nations. This is, frankly speaking, the place where I start coughing when in 2014 I was asked by some military advisors, I was general at that time, and when Russia started occupying Crimea, I was asked by representatives from other countries, General, you said you have armed forces. Yes, we have. Why you do not oppose? Why you don't fight against Russian forces which started occupation of Crimea? I had nothing to respond. I still have no answer, frankly speaking. At that time, I start coughing, and I still continue. I have no answers for many questions regarding this. But it was obvious that time that we need to do something within the UN, within the Security Council structure, within the ability of state started aggression against another state. And they were opposing any resolution which will say that Russia is state of aggression. We need the changes in OSCE structure. It is obvious that the ability of OSCE as such, as an organization, to influence the security in Europe is over. It is a great place to be, to discuss, but is that organization capable of making strong decisions? It's obvious not the case. We need something new. Nobody knows for sure what should be new. Me either. But I believe that we need to create some new architecture. What will be the place of Ukraine? Well, nowadays we play a decisive role in creation of future security architecture. Future security architecture depends on the results of this war. The new security architecture depends on the results of our victory. And I don't agree with those politicians who are afraid of collapse Russia as a state. I do believe that future security architecture should exclude possible reincarnation of their aggressive intentions. It should prevent further thinking of somebody from Kremlin to feel himself as a new dictator, new emperor, and to allow Russia start a new war in several years. We should do something. And there are voices in Russia which say that Russia is fighting with the NATO. Russia is fighting with Ukraine. But is NATO involved? Yes. Not just NATO. I would rather consider this is World War III, because many countries are influenced by this war. Many countries are participating in this war, some way or another. Some countries provide us with weapons. Some countries provide us with economical support, with financial support, with humanitarian support. Some countries are suffering from this war. And NATO countries are also suffering from this war because they didn't expect to spend so much money and so much efforts to put on the case of somebody's war, which is not a NATO member. There are suffering countries in Africa due to that food embargo Russia imposed in the Black Sea. Russia eliminated the freedom of movement in the Black Sea region. Russia eliminated the right of African countries to get food from Ukraine. They destroyed our infrastructure in agricultural sector. We are not capable to produce as much food as we did before. because they destroyed this agricultural infrastructure in Ukraine. So this war is influencing many, many countries in many senses, in many directions. This should be taken into account when we will start to create a new security architecture, not just in Europe, as I said, but in the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. You opened a lot of really pertinent issues, and I'm not sure if we'll get to all of them on the panel, but Dr. Črnčec, I want to pick it up with you. What is your view of the, if you look at the geopolitical context in which this conflict is occurring? And I'm not sure whether to feel the same question of the new security architecture, but I know you will have a lot to say about this. But mostly, what are the implications for our security in our region?
Yeah, thank you. I will try to kind of follow up what Ambassador was saying about the whole spectrum of how basically international security network guarantees failed. We can go to Budapest Memorandum, we can go to the OSCE that didn't do its job, we can start talking about security, United Nations, Security Council reform structures there. But I would like to be basically, I will kind of a little bit focus ourselves to more practical consequences and the things I see kind of that are going to probably follow up as a consequence of this failed war by Russia. If you look very simplistically, remember ourselves, we joined NATO, EU. It was an old slogan, first NATO, then EU. It was a few months' time difference in Slovenian case, but in Montenegrin case, it's a little bit more probably, or it is already, and it was in Croatian case and some other countries. So, and it's basically everything value-driven. When we decided that we are going to be independent, we decided also that our values are the same that we share with this European space. And where I see this parallel now, it's the one with Ukraine is exactly the same. We are hearing about the corruption in Ukraine, corruption in Russia, oligarchs, everything is the same in Russia, Ukraine. This is like simplistically saying, you know, they are all the same, this is not our war, this is nothing to do with us. But it's not true. They are in the same position as we were. They decided that their values are on the western side, not on the eastern side. And when they decided this, and they start taking steps, of course, big neighbor said, no, you are not allowed to do it, because it's our right, due to the Second World War, due to the historic, due to the Kiev, Moscow, whatever, times in the mid-ages, when they were conquered by Golden Horde, probably, I don't know, but they came back to the history, but it's nothing to do with the history. It's about the nation that decided where they want to be. And they decided. And when they start making concrete exact steps, they were attacked. So, values. And we remember French president said how NATO has a brain cancer, is brain dead. It was not so many years ago. Or we had French fries and freedom fries connected with the decision within this Western alliance in regards to the Iraq. Everything changed. And everything, and also the notion that Russia shouldn't be humiliated. It was not so old ago, the notion set also on the Western Hemisphere. Everything now is gone. This is gone, and this is already changed. We saw unprecedented thing that NATO enlarged with Finland, with Sweden. When I was a student, we were hearing about these neutral states. They will never, as Switzerland, never going to be part of any bloc. But no, they are, one is already within the NATO, second one probably is going to be very soon. So this is very exact consequence of the new security architecture in Europe. So what we are seeing basically is that, of course, NATO is alive, European Union is alive, European Union with broader spectrum of course, being first economic alliance and then values, human rights, and of course also defense pillar. We heard yesterday is giving timetables to Western Balkans and is inviting Ukraine, Moldova, So the countries, Georgia, on the hemisphere or on the outskirts, I would say, of European Union. So this is the new architecture. So the bloc of countries, alliances that are democratic driven is formed, and it's going to follow on. And I think we will have this kind of, at the end of the day, the result being all together in one or other way. And just briefly, in regards to the Russia, I said many times before that Balkanization can be the realistic scenario of Russia after this failed war. They have many issues within demographic and all sorts of them. And the consequence is going to be that the Russia will have huge struggles to survive as a state that it is today. And this is probably very realistic scenario that we are going to see. And of course, then we have to talk about some winners. China for sure is a winner of this conflict. And as I said from the start on, it was who is responsible for that. We know who is. There is no excuse to send the rockets on shopping malls, to destroy the energetic facility, critical infrastructure during the winter, to attack the electricity grids. There is no excuse for this. And you cannot judge or you cannot talk positively in any way about this, kind of trying to make excuses for Russia for being forcefully doing this because of Donbass, all these kind of stories. So the change is already here, is happening, we are seeing it. And I don't want to go on the global, but I will just finish with by saying this. There is a so-called Rammstein group, which is led by U.S. Defense Secretary, Minister of Defense of United States, and there are 50 countries. And we know there is 31 within the NATO and European Union less. So there are countries like Australia, South Korea, participating in this kind of forum that is providing support, the whole spectrum of support to Ukraine. So it's not just a NATO-EU, it's a real global values-driven alliance that is protecting, fighting, and supporting Ukraine. And I'm sure that we are not going to see any fatigue in doing that until the final goal is achieved, and what was said by the ambassador.
Thank you very much for bringing up the issue of values that underpin all of our efforts together. And I want to pick it up on this. And Mr. Perović, Western Balkans has decided the value system which it wants to follow. It has decided its path of Euro and Atlantic integration. And at the same time, Russia is very engaged in Western Balkans and has been. Since the start of the aggression in Ukraine, we've also seen Russian officials make statements about Western Balkans almost on a weekly, but definitely on a monthly basis. So it's been really high on the agenda. What impact do you see this war is having in Western Balkans?
Well, you know, Western Balkans is unfortunately still perceived as one of these areas that are prone to conflicts, influences from the third size, malign influence, and so on. So there was a big worry, and I think you noticed that in the NATO statements that the Balkans, the Western Balkans rather, can be destabilized because of the situation. But I think the Western Balkans showed to be much more resilient than everybody expected, including ourselves. And I think there are two main reasons. One is the NATO presence, meaning the membership of a number of countries now in the region into the NATO. And the second thing is the presence of international troops, NATO in Kosovo, EU in Bosnia, that helped to, you know, keep calm there. And the second thing was the enormous success of the Ukrainian defenders, which basically humiliated Russia, showed that Russia is not that strong and powerful as the pro-Russian parties and the people in the Balkans believed to, basically believing into what was the Kremlin propaganda, which weakened their political position inside our countries in the Western Balkans. As we discussed during our lunch, Western Balkans is in terms of relations with Russia a bit specific ways. One important thing is that our part of Europe was never occupied by Russians or the Soviets, like Poland, for example. So you don't have this kind of personal experience and collective memory that is related to that. So it is then much easier to accept all these stories about Russian protectionism and so on. And the second thing is that for the last 30 or something years, we experienced something completely opposite to the other former socialist countries, and that was a war in ex-Yugoslavia, which was followed, and that is important for understanding this concept of relations with Russia. It was followed from the very beginning by the exceptionally strong anti-Western propaganda. Not necessarily pro-Russian, but it was generally anti-Western. And that continues for decades, so which made a strong impact on the part of the population. But however, as you said, I think that generally in the region, population want to be a part of the European Union. Population now support, I think, more NATO membership than that is the case in Montenegro, as showed the last Vox Populi released just before the summit in Vilnius. So I am pretty optimistic in the future of our country. And the support for Ukraine is very strong. In Montenegro, it is difficult to give precise figures, but it's around 30,000 people, refugees, which is for a small country of 600,000, just the enormous.
Are you equally optimistic for the future of the region?
Well, I think so. I think if the United States and the Europeans remain focused on our region and remain committed really to support the reform parties to play less on the, what we also mentioned before, stabilocracy systems, meaning, to try make this trade between stability and tolerating organized crime, autocracy, and so on. I am in that case optimistic, as well as for the other countries like Ukraine and Moldova, Georgia, that at the end the forces that are pro-European are going to prevail there. Thank you.
We certainly hope you're right. We will support you all the way. Ambassador Olendzki, I want to get your perspective on, there's a very specific bond that's being created now between Ukraine and Poland, and I think it's also going to redefine the geopolitics of the region once the conflict is over. I want to get your perspective on that, and also, do you see Ukraine in NATO? Very directly? Yes. Yeah. That was a simple answer.
The answer is very simple, but I mean, this war and the way which our allies from NATO just took toward Ukraine right now, I mean, gives a hope and gives also kind of a certainty that I mean, once Ukraine got the perspective to NATO and to EU, I mean, we are going to change entire geopolitics. So, but let me recall the war from the past century, the war of 1920. So at that time, the free, independent Ukraine was emerging. So the government of Ataman Skoropadsky, then Ataman Petlura, was creating a new democratic independent Ukraine. At that time attacked from the one side by the Red Army, from the other side by the White Army. And when Polish governments tried to negotiate with the so-called democratic Ukraine, because it was a small part of the democratic, not Ukraine, but Russians, they were saying, no, Ukraine is a part of the Russia. So there was no an imagination that Ukraine could be an independent state. And in the same time, big empires, starting from the United States through Great Britain, then France was the less convinced that for the Russia. Those empires were saying, no, it's only Russia who is able to provide the security and the stability in Eastern Europe. So right now, so 103 years after, we are facing totally different situation. So I really do hope that today, no one is thinking about Russia as a factor of the stability. Just before March 24th, still in Brussels, people were thinking, yeah, I mean, Russia is providing peace and stability there, so let's keep Russia, let's not to help Ukraine. Today, we are having a different perspective, and we must continue. We must just keep on going. So Ukraine is an independent state with the full right for the development, with the full right to be a part of our community of values, because they are showing their values. They are demonstrating by their blood where are their hearts and where are their inspiration. We cannot say to them, no, we are closing because that's Russia and the sphere of Russian influence. There shouldn't be any kind of the Russian influence. It shouldn't be, again, the moment in which the Northern Pipeline will be built just to exclude Central Europe from the zone of the security and prosperity. It's over, I really do hope, and Poland will do everything just to maintain the situation, just to have Ukraine, and hopefully very soon Belarus. Because Belarusians are also inspiring to be a part of our European democratic independent world, in spite of this gentleman who pretends to be president of the country. They are also having the right, because they are having not only aspirations, but they are having their national identity. They are having their own country. They would like to develop. Pax Mongolica, which was established in the 14th century, it was just for Russia. It was just for this part where the satrapies were established. It was for Moscow. It's Moscovia. So we don't want to have Moscovia. We would like to have Ukraine, Belarus, Ruthenians in Europe. Because in this way, we can build up a new architecture for peace and stability and the security. There is no security without Ukraine in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Haibach, I know you're going to have a lot to say on the discussion, and particularly I want to get to you. But before I do, 1 second, Jerry, I'm looking at you. Hi. Do we have a microphone? Because I actually do want to go around. Because prepare for questions, please. I do want to take a couple of questions. We got a great audience in the room today, and I want your input on this discussion. So, Mr. Haibach, you wanted to discuss with us, and please do, how you see the implications of the situation right now for Southeast Europe. We have not mentioned the Black Sea region. We have not mentioned Moldova. So please go ahead and give your insights.
Well, it's hard to talk about anything positive as far as the Russian war against Ukraine is concerned. But what it did, and the State Secretary was already pointing to it, is It brought Europe and the United States closer together within the framework and NATO, but also elsewhere. We still have our differences, but we are much closer now than we used to be for a very long time. I think it brought back home to everybody that we need to stand together if Ukraine, and with Ukraine, the whole Western world is supposed to be successful. And the second thing that it did was that a lot of people, again, took an interest in especially the region of the Western Balkans, which had been slightly overlooked, especially with the US phasing out during the last government, and the American ambassador to Germany proactively taking a very pro-Serbian role, which fortunately now has been reversed. This is very important, very, very, very important. And our colleague from Montenegro has already made it quite clear. It is pivotal that there is a strong American-European presence economically, financially, but also in terms of security in the region, just simply in order to stabilize it. And again, it is not only for the sake of the region, but it's for the sake of Europe and the EU as a whole, because we cannot afford another kind of destabilized areas that is so close to us. And so I think that these are the two very important points that need to be emphasized, that we not only are obliged to help because it is a question of solidarity, but it is also a question of our own security, of our own way of living, of our own democracy values, of everything that countries stand for, and that especially, I mean, this whole conflict rings a lot of bells in Slovenia and Croatia, because there, 30 years ago, freedom had to be fought for, democracy had to be fought for, independence had to be fought for. So this is I think, something that is closer to home to a lot of people here than it may be in Germany, where conflicts have been not fought for a very, very long time. And I think that is one of the most important points that I think at least those who take decisions have understood the message that only if we stand together we are going to be able to support Ukraine in a way that it comes out successful on the other side. And I would like to close by saying that, you know, there is this saying that, because the Polish ambassador made reference to that, peace is not only the absence of war. Peace, and the EU, we must not forget this, is always been labeled as a peace project. And what other option do we have than trying to provide real peace, not only the absence of war?
Thank you so much for ending on such a strong note. I believe I have a question. Go ahead, sir. Please introduce yourself and direct the question to a particular panelist or to the panel.
Thank you very much. My name is Miroslav Gregoric. I'm a member of Slovenian Parliament with my own opinion. This is a panel of convinced experts and politicians with one single convincing view. Not a gram of different view was presented. However, if we...
Sir, if you do not have a question, I will kindly ask you to.
I'm going to the question. However, there are several US authors like Mearsheimer, Abelov, Mearsheimer, Ray McGovern, Larry Johnson, Colonel Douglas McGregor, Jeffrey Sachs, Noam Chomsky, who tend to believe that this is war between US and Russia on Ukraine soil. We know in the past year and a half there were peace initiatives from Israel, Turkey, China, South Africa and other African dignitaries, Brazil, Pope, and of course also Ukraine initiative. And now we heard in the introductory statement that peace is easy to achieve. Just withdraw the Russian forces, the aggressor, and peace is here. Fine. My question is, if this will not happen, what is the plan B? Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
I can maybe first. Thank you for the question. At the end of the day, every war is decided the same way, behind the green table. The difference is on the time scale, and the end result is driven, of course, by fait accompli, by the facts on the grounds. And military willingness on one hand side, and we didn't touch upon, we didn't go in details about the military strategy, and it was mentioned today that how the offensive is slow going. We can go into in-depth deliberations if this is actually really true. If you compare it to the Western kind of way of fighting, having the air superiority and then bomb for 3 or 4 weeks the lines, and then you can go with the troops. So Ukraine is doing it the hard way. And of course, the peace and the achievement of the peace and the result of the peace is going to be established as a result of the results on the ground. And that's it. This is the determination of the victim in this case, whether aggressor will have the ability to sustain and how long he's going to sustain. Therefore, I mentioned the word fatigue. It's another story. But I would just like to say one word also in Slovenia. When we were in NATO summit, we saw in Slovenia media article how support in Slovenia for NATO is declining. When the floods started to happen in Slovenia, we saw the article how Russia provided or offered support to Slovenia. What is the reality? The reality is that the support is actually the same. It was since 2003 when we won on a referendum, and it was 2/3 majority on the referendum. We done many polls in between, and the result was the same. So the support didn't change. As far as the floods is concerned, it was officially written dementi by Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia that, of course, Russia never offered any support, not even, of course, it didn't deliver. But we saw, on the other hand side, as I mentioned in my introduction, Ukraine done its share. So these are the facts, and there are some, of course, the fantasies or propaganda and misinformation, and we can have a special panel about disinformation, propaganda, and all this stuff. So this is the reality, and the reality is we have a democracy, values-driven country that is victim of aggressor, and it choose their path, and somebody who has a fake democracy is sending rockets to blockade this, and that's it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Ambassador.
If I may to add something. You are absolutely right. There are two ways, two scenarios of how this war will end. I believe you don't think that this war will last 400 years, right? War should be ended somehow, somewhen. There are just two scenarios for the end of the war. Ukraine prevail or Russia prevail. I don't think that you believe that the US convinced every single state in the whole world to support Ukraine. It was the own decision by every state, civilized state, to support Ukraine. Why? Because they don't want another scenario. They don't want Russia to prevail. They already feel the threat from Russia. It is not the US fighting against Russia. This is Russia fighting against Ukraine, and in speaking about Ukraine, they mean the whole civilized world. Switzerland is neutral, of course, but Sweden is afraid of Russia, Finland is afraid of Russia. They are afraid of another scenario. Poland is afraid of another scenario. Baltic states are afraid of another scenario. That is why they support us, not because these states are convinced by the US. They don't want Russia to prevail. They don't want, just because Russia will not stand at the border of Ukraine. If Russia prevails, it will go further. It is Russian empire, and it will become stronger if we lose this war. But we will not lose. Don't worry, we will win.
Thank you very much. We have 2 more questions that I'd like to take in the interest of time. I'll take them together.
David Merkel with Summit International Advisors. My question is directed to the colleague from Germany specifically. Robert Gates wrote an article, The Return of History, and talking about great power competition. And many say that after Georgia in 2008, Ukraine 2014, Syria, that what encouraged Putin to act was not, as Mearsheimer would have it, NATO expansion, but in fact it was that the West failed to respond. So my question is the separation with Russia, is Russia's isolation from Europe, is that complete, or is it a temporary thing depending on the outcome of the war in Ukraine? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to take another question and then we'll respond and conclude the panel.
Hi, thank you. Nate, Chief Scout in Slovenia. Scouting is a global movement established for building peace. I'm the Chief Scout. This means that I'm the president of the Slovenian Scout, which is like one of the biggest youth organization. So my question is, like a few weeks ago, when the floods came, Scouts were out there helping, and not only we, because we serve, we need to serve because it's in us, but all nations come together and serve. Also in Poland, as I'm speaking with my colleagues from Poland, I know, and Czech Republic also, and they are like scouting and guiding is like really, really helping people from Ukraine, refugees, helping them. So I don't know, in Krakow they have like all Maribor refugees are living in Krakow. So Polish scouts and young people are doing a lot. So I'm just asking you, do you think that we always need really bad things to happen to rethink our future, or maybe we can educate young people, because I strongly believe it? And can you maybe just a few of you share shortly maybe how we can learn people and educate them, young kids and youth, for solidarity and for democracy? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the slightly philosophical but a very important questions of how not to repeat history. Would you like to take it up first, Holger?
Yes, actually, I can put the two together. I mean, sometimes you have to have something taken away from you so that you can really evaluate it. And peace is something that we have taken for granted far too long. And unfortunately, Germany did its share, that's true. We had the former German Minister of Defense, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, who also happened to be the chairman of our party here in Slovenia and also in Croatia, and she went on a record saying that, for instance, Nord Stream was a mistake that should never have happened, actually. And so I think the awareness is there, that we cannot go back and do the same old. Nobody wants to do that, with the exception of the far right and the far left for various reasons. But in the end, I think in Germany, at least those people who are reasonable political leaders have understood that after a hopefully successful outcome for Ukraine, things have to change dramatically.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's the education of the youth is absolutely crucial, but that's the question to politicians. So, what kind of future they would like to design for the young people, for students, for a scout and girls and boys. So, I mean, I'm a former scout boy, and I'm hearing from here and there that scoutism is something wrong, is something oppressive, is fascist, because you are wearing uniforms. It's something wrong. So, what does it mean? I mean, how we would like to educate young people? What kind of examples you would like to present to them? And that's the entire discussion about the deconstruction of the history, about the deconstruction of the society. From the other side, I mean, it's very easy to destroy society which is deconstructed. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to make them believe that Russia is fighting for peace. Thank you.
Mr. Perović, final thoughts?
Yep, just to add something to the ambassador said, you know, I absolutely agree, and I know the Scouts are one of these organizations that are very important for this kind of social networking related to good causes. And I think generally in Europe, one of the reasons that we have this kind of solidarity with Ukraine is that people for the last decades are really more or less, you know, educated in that spirit. It was just the opposite, unfortunately, in Russia, especially for the last 6 to 7 years. It was a very specific and weird militarization of the society, with rewriting of the history, with creation of some paramilitary troops even for small kids and so on. So that was a very important element of preparing Russia for this crazy war against Ukraine. So I absolutely agree, and the organizations like yours are, you know, exceptionally important for the European future. Thank you.
Last word.
The last remark. I would like to ask one question. Mr. Gregorich, who just raised up the question of the peace. So in your fight for peace, because I presume that you are fighting for peace, that you are preaching for peace, how many refugees have you assisted? How many people do you help in your fight for peace? Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear panelists. The applause next door was my cue, plus the clock has run out. Thank you so much for all your wonderful thoughts. Please join me in thanking our exceptional panelists for their thoughts today. And for the final word, let's keep the spirit of solidarity. Thank you.